Hi, everyone. We're going to kick off today's presentation in about 1 minute. We just want to give a few stragglers some time to join in. So we'll begin 1 minute after the hour. Okay, let's get started. So good afternoon or good morning if you happen to be on the West Coast, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Transform Your Finance Business Function with SAP Business ByDesign. My name is Rihanna Thompson, and I'll be your moderator for today's presentation. Today, Illumity is happy to have you all join us. Today, presenting, we will be joined by Andrew Howell, the Director of SAP Business ByDesign, and Ian Bottom, an Account Executive at Illumity. Before handing it over to our presenters, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping items. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters. So if you do have any questions throughout today's presentation, feel free to type them out into the chat. But in the interest of time, we will probably get to the majority of them during our Q&A session at the end. Hopefully, we will have time to get to everyone. With that being said, I will hand it over to Ian.
Perfect. Thanks, Brianna. So the plan for today, everyone, is just to go through a couple slides on who we are at Illumity, SAP, and the cloud ERP offerings that we provide. And then I'm going to pass it over to Andrew to go through an overview demonstration of SAP Business ByDesign. So with that, we'll get started. Illumity is an SAP Platinum partner. We've been around since 2000. All we do is SAP, so we sell and implement all three SAP ERP products. We have over 200 happy customers, 400 consultants on projects, and we've implemented over 100 ERP projects in the last 21 years. We have 7 offices worldwide, and like I mentioned, all we do is SAP. So we're your one-stop shop from ERP, HRIS, business intelligence, and post-go-live support as well. So why Illumity? We focus on implementing SAP faster at a lower cost and with reduced risk than our competition. And like any consulting firm, our real differentiator is our people. We really pride ourselves in our customer service, our implementation approach to SAP, and not only are our consultants SAP experts, they're also industry experts as well. We have an in-house R&D department, and we guarantee our results by putting our fees at risk. And this slide really is just to show, obviously there's a perception in the marketplace that SAP is really for the big Fortune 500 companies. And we just wanted to show that actually 75% of SAP's customers are below $1 billion in revenue, and about 65% are below $500 million in revenue. And that's really the area that Illumity focuses, especially with our cloud ERP offerings. This is a snapshot of SAP, obviously one of the global leaders in ERP software with over 425,000 customers in 180 countries. The stat I want to draw your attention to is in the bottom right. SAP invests over 3.6 billion euros annually into R&D. And with our cloud-based ERP offerings, the product is actually updated every single quarter. So as you continue to use the product, it just continues to get better and better over time. So it really future-proofs your investment in SAP technology. And then some of the drivers that we're seeing in the mid-market space with regards to ERP is rapid growth and global expansion, especially in 2021. It's a lot easier, and there's a lot more opportunities to expand your company globally, which can often bring up new challenges and complexities that SAP can help with. A lot of M&A activity. We haven't seen this slow down with COVID. In some cases, in some industries, it's actually sped up the M&A activity. Obviously, lots of regulatory changes, so having a system that's updated quarterly and can account for these is extremely important. And then obviously, businesses are just more complex than they used to be. So having a single integrated ERP system across all lines of business is extremely valuable. With SAP's mid-market ERP offerings, there's a low total cost of ownership, really quick implementation timeframes, and the best practice-based implementation approach also reduces risk in your projects. And as you'll see in the demo, there's real-time visibility into all aspects of your business, all from a single KPI dashboard, and it allows you to drill down into the different areas of your business with just a couple clicks. There's also a group at SAP called SAP Value Engineering, and what this service does is they'll benchmark your business KPIs before and after implementing SAP to help really show the KPIs and the savings that you've found by implementing SAP. So some of the ones that we wanted to draw your attention to is a 10 to 30% reduced revenue leakage, 20% procurement savings, 95% faster MRP, and 70% faster to close the books. So these are real benefits that customers see by implementing SAP. And if you guys are interested in having SAP and Illumity help build a business case for an ERP project, that's definitely something that Andrew and I can help with. With the SAP Business ByDesign solution that Andrew's going to be showing today, we call it a suite in a box. And what that means is it has all the core modules that you need to run your business, all delivered out of the box by SAP with best practices that our consultants are able to turn on for you fairly quickly. So we have human resources, financial, CRM, supply chain management, all out of the box. And it also is an adaptable solution, so you can integrate with other best of breed CRM solutions or HR solutions where needed. As Andrew's going to show you in just a couple minutes, we have embedded best practices out of the box and insights. But I think the key for this slide as well is the continuous innovation. So between Illumity and SAP, we're going to help you to continue to get better and advance your ERP with over time with new capabilities that are coming every single quarter. And last but not least, I've mentioned these best practice business scenarios. There's 36 of them that come out of the box with Business ByDesign. And we try to help our customers adopt these as much as possible. And we only deviate where it really makes sense or it's really your secret sauce. So for example, expense reimbursement is not something that is really a differentiator for your business. So we would push you to adopt best practices right out of the box. But maybe there's something with, let me look here, product engineering that really differentiates your business where the best practice doesn't exactly fit your business. And that's where we would help you to adapt the system to meet your exact needs. With that said, Andrew, I'm going to pass it over to you to dive into the system.
Perfect. So I will turn my camera on here so everyone has confirmation that this is in fact a live demonstration. So give me 1 second here. I need to get to my Google Chrome browser. Okay. So to start off, you'll notice that I'm leveraging a Google Chrome browser to conduct today's demo. SAP Business ByDesign, as Ian alluded to, is a cloud-based ERP provided by SAP. Within the browser link, you'll notice that there's a unique URL, which in this circumstance represents a Canadian localized demo environment. If you were to purchase SAP Business ByDesign for your organization, as a part of your subscription, you receive 2 environments at any given point in time. One which is your production environment that you run the organization on day to day, and the second would be a replication of that environment for testing purposes. Now, you don't have to use Google Chrome exclusively. You can, of course, use any state-of-the-art web browser like Internet Explorer 8 and above, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, and Safari for those of you that are using Apple-oriented devices. Now, what's unique about our product is that it is built on HTML5 technology. So what this implies is that you can access this ERP from any device that ultimately has one of these state-of-the-art browsers and an internet connection. I find it works really well on iPads and tablets. When you get to using a smartphone or something that's a bit smaller, we typically recommend using some of the apps that come pre-delivered with to facilitate processes with SAP Business ByDesign. Some of those apps include things like time entry, manager approval, things of that nature. That's something we can leave for a separate webinar. So for today's demo, you'll notice that I will be jumping into a financial orientated user. Their access rights in the system are limited to that of what you would traditionally see a controller or CFO have access to within our ERP. I do have to put an asterisk around that comment though, because we have provided this user with liberal rights so that I don't have to log in and out to demonstrate certain features and functions and concepts. So with that said, I'll orientate the audience on what Business ByDesign looks like and what every single user has at their fingertips. And then we'll dive into some analytics and actually get into some of the core financial components of SAP Business ByDesign and what this ERP can bring to your business. So firstly, you'll notice that when I log in with my user, that we land on what's called a Launchpad. The Launchpad is basically an area that is customized on a per user basis. So anyone that logs into our system, they have the ability to customize this area to their desire. So you can see here that I've created a bunch of different groupings of tiles. Each tile represents a specific transaction or analytics or notifications. So you'll notice at the top here under the inbox, grouping, I have actually 48 different open items that represent tasks in this circumstance that have been brought to my attention. Now, what this implies is that there is an internal communication mechanism within our ERP that in the event, if you have a responsibility along a best practice scenario like procure to pay or order to cash, say for example, you are shipping or receiving or even approving, for example, a purchase order, the notifications and workflow in the system actually are brought to your attention within these tiles. So you can see that we have alerts, tasks, notifications, and then you might get a clarification request from a user that might want your input on, the PO you're entering or the accounts payable invoice that you're entering. With that said, you'll see we've got a custom grouping here with a variety of different transactions related to accounting. For example, being able to manage your fixed assets, distribution for management accounting if you wanted rent expense to hit multiple different departments in terms of cost accounting. And you'll see here then we also have some standards, right, for accounting, so financial accounting, the ability to edit your exchange rates, open close periods, so on and so forth. In regard to exchange rates, in case you are curious, they could be entered directly through the system here. You can upload them through a pre-delivered upload spreadsheet, which is in Excel, or you can actually connect with like the Bank of Canada, for example, in this case, through a website known as Oanda. There's a couple websites that you can connect with and actually automate your exchange being uploaded on a daily basis via web service API. As I scroll down further, you can see there's a variety of different tiles that we've placed on this dashboard. But what I wanted to bring to your attention is that you can also embed key performance indicators that you want to bring to your attention at the start of your day. And here are just some examples where you can see gross profit is actually dropping. The trend, the arrow signifies that it is dropping. You have some overdue receivables, and that's likely what's driving this as well, in that your overdue receivables are on the rise. And then there's some other metrics here that are brought to your attention. But what we'll do when we get into the analytics aspect of the demo, I'll actually take you to a dashboard with a wide variety of these different KPIs, and I'll show you how you can use one with a specific business context in mind. But before we get there, there's a few other things I need to go through. You'll notice here that there are also some additional external links to other cloud products. We at Illumity actually run Business ByDesign for our own internal operations. And with our ERP, we happen to use Teams for communication. We have SAP Analytics Cloud for advanced analytics. You can see that we also have a link to SharePoint, and then success factors, which we use for things like recruiting, performance and goal management, things of that nature. By clicking the tile with single sign-on, I can actually access that environment by simply clicking this button and taking us to the associated URL. I'm not clicking it today just because there is confidential information in there related to Illumity. It's not a demo system link, hence why I'm not going there. But in terms of being able to customize this Launchpad, you simply go into personalization mode, and it's a very, very straightforward process. You can only add tiles that you have access to from a security perspective. If you wanted to add a transaction that you did not have access to within the system, you would not be able to do that within this area. Now, to add a transaction that you do have access to, and I'll talk about security in a moment, you simply click the plus sign, and based on your security, if I wanted to add, for example, under customer invoicing, credit memo, I simply click on this pin icon, click apply, and now the new credit memo has been added to my Launchpad. I can rename it if I'd like to something that's more meaningful to me as a user, and it will change the description so that I see it in a different manner. I can also drag and drop, within a group so that it's in the order that I desire, or I can drag and drop it to a different section completely. So you can see that customizing this area is very user-friendly, easy to do, and it's just a matter of saving the changes, and you will ultimately have those changes applied on an ongoing basis when you log in the future. So what I'm gonna do here is just stop personalization and not save these changes just for the future demos and webinars I have to conduct. And there's just a few more things we have to go through before we dive into analytics and see some of the core accounting topics that I'm sure everyone is very interested in for today's webinar. Before we do that, I just wanted to orientate the audience on other elements of what SAP brings to each user's fingertips. On the left-hand side here, we have what are called work centers. And work centers are a grouping of transactions, or views, if you will, that have been grouped into logic that has been built in the best practice of SAP over 40 plus years of experience. So Business ByDesign has been in the world for roughly a decade or so once the cloud technologies were emerging into the marketplace. And this product was built on the big brother or big sister product known as S/4HANA today, wherein those best practices have ultimately been compiled into this mid-market product. And the knowledge that we've gained over those 40 plus years of being in this space is what's driven the logic of how these work centers have been put together. So if someone in accounting was processing invoicing, the access and those best practices that SAP has derived over the years is also built on segregation of duties in terms of security, and is based on a concept known as Sarbanes-Oxley. It's a governing body that drives segregation of duty concepts. The segregation of duties concept that's embedded within SAP is a recommendation and alerts your organization as to where you are exposed from a fraudulent, where you're exposed to fraudulent activity. And an example that I like to use is that, someone who's entering an invoice should not necessarily be the same individual that's running a payment run and ultimately cutting the check or, processing the ACH wire transfer file. For obvious reasons, you would be exposed as an organization to fraudulent activity, but the system doesn't limit you from providing a user with multiple type responsibilities as I described, but it will inform you that you are exposed. And the reason why that's an important comment is that our product is tailored to very large organizations where you have hundreds of users, to very small organizations where you go with the minimum of 5. And in that case, you might have one accountant, you might have one person in sales and purchasing, and the accountant basically runs the organization. And in that scenario, that accountant would of course need the abilities to process AP, run your payment runs, and then disperse the cash to your suppliers. Okay, so that's what these represent. These are work centers on the left with groupings of transactions. You can see here under the purchasing side, this is the start of procure to pay, and supplier invoicing is the final step in terms of three-way matching when you process your invoice against the goods receipt and PO. So with that said, there's a couple other things before we get into analytics. I just wanted to point out the help center here. If I was to search on something, on a certain term, like let's say I'm getting an error message that says accounting period closed, the help center will search a variety of different resources. There's embedded help resources, which resides within SAP's knowledge base. There's community resources, which ultimately finds within this blogging community where there's a wiki. You have partners and customers blogging about various topics. This string is then searching those artifacts to see if there is a blog or topic that you can read from the external world. And then last but not least, there's also troubleshooting guides. I'm just going to click on the first one here, but the point is that this particular knowledge base article document, also known as an OSS note, includes the string of what we input into the search. You can see here accounting period closed. And so what this note provides you is what's causing the problem, how you reproduce it, and how to rectify it via resolution. So there are many different customers and partners leveraging this product, and every error message, warning message, or even information message has a corresponding note where you can search and determine what the nature of that notification is telling you. And this really helps from a self-service perspective when you are using the system, especially in those first few months after going live. If there are things that you want to learn or understand further, you can use the help center, to self-serve that need. So with that said, what I'm going to do here is jump into the analytics part of the demo. So we have this dashboard of various different KPIs and reports and of course dashboards that bring a variety of different metrics to our attention. And you'll see here, because I'm logged in with a financial orientated user, I pretty much have KPIs that are relevant to my role. There are of course KPIs and reports that are relevant to different departments and functional areas of your organization that you would see if we logged in with, say, a purchasing user. But what I'll do is cover a bunch of these at a high level, and we'll actually drill down into the customer receivables aging dashboard and actually go all the way down into some underlining transactions. So I'll show you how far we can go down the rabbit hole in terms of getting to debits and credits. So with that said, you'll see that we have gross profit. The color being red or green is basically showing how you are performing against that KPI in the context of the thresholds that have been established by the organization. So here you can see that our gross profit is not adhering to those thresholds or objectives that we've established as an organization. And it actually is showing that the trend of gross profit is on the decline. We have obviously EBIT, there's cost of sales, gross profit margin, return on sales, operating profit, you name it. There's also a very interesting metric here on the right-hand side. And for those in accounting, if you're a controller, this actually gives you some great insights. So Maverick Spend, if you're familiar with the movie Top Gun and you know Maverick, you can imagine what this is related to. It ultimately represents invoices that are not referencing a purchase order. And so you can see where, and in this case, it's showing by supplier, the total percentage they make up of that number. And you can find out where you don't have the appropriate controls in place in terms of managing your spend with that supply chain. As I scroll down, you'll see that we have accounts receivable aging. I hover my mouse over any one of these buckets and it'll tell you the amount and the bucket it represents. So in this circumstance, we're looking at a little over 700,000 in open receivables in the 120 plus day bucket. And then we have a corresponding payables KPI which represents the same metrics just on the AP side. And there's a few other things here that are important to accountants, but also the ultimate supply chain of purchasing. So there's vendor price reliability, which ultimately brings to your attention where, what was negotiated through your purchasing department, where there are deviations in that three-way match process with accounting. So here you could see that we negotiated $24 Canadian per linear foot, and that when we processed the invoice, what we were actually charged by that vendor were $26.74 per linear foot. Now, when you're processing the invoice, there is this concept of exceptions, and you can actually have an exception be routed to your purchasing manager in this scenario to approve before the invoice is actually posted to the ledger. And what that actually allows you to do in terms of control is it allows the purchasing manager to follow up with the supplier in the event that the deviation was unexpected. If it was expected and the purchasing manager knows exactly as to why the price is different, they can always approve that exception, and then the invoice would be posted to the GL for cash disbursement. And then what's also very important here, and this is more of a logistics report, it's not really accounting relevant, but it does show you here how your vendors are performing in terms of meeting their obligations and in terms of the expected delivery dates that they have committed to. So you could see here that this particular product, which represents a bearing, was 520 days late from when the supplier planned to provide it, which was June 12th, but it was actually delivered November 13th of the next year, you can see in 2020. So again, that's a very useful report, especially if you're dealing with clients maybe that are remote, or you might have a warehouse that's remote. We find in the mining space that we target, and in construction, that that report is very useful when you're dealing with remote locations. So what I'll do from here is I'm going to drill down into this customer receivables aging report to show you some concepts about in regard to what we can do with analytics and drill down. So I'm just going to take a quick sip of water here. I do apologize for the frog in my throat. I've just been in back-to-back meetings all day, so I'm gonna have to take a couple sips of water as we go through this. So I spoke earlier about the thresholds related to a KPI. And so this is again set up, as I mentioned, as a part of the implementation project, and you define what your target objective is related to that KPI. So in this circumstance, what we want to try to achieve is having an open receivable balance of no more than $350,000. Our goal is actually to keep it well below this target, right? So the target is to be below 350, and we want our collections department or AR clerk to be warned that they are close to violating this objective when they hit 300,000 in open receivables. And when we go beyond 500,000, it's a red alert, like we're not meeting our corporate objectives at all. And this is flagged at both, the executive level, but also your collections clerk or AR clerk can use the KPI to help strategize as to what to collect first. So firstly, it tells you how you're performing against that target and the deviation that you have. You can see here we're well in excess of the 350 target by a little over 700,000. Now, when I look below at the data, I can see where our receivables lie in terms of aging bucket. And our 120-day plus bucket is obviously has the highest balance. So what I can do from here is I can actually go into a contextual report if I'm a collections clerk or with an AR clerk that has to follow up on receivables, and I can go into that bucket and evaluate, who's the culprit that's making up the majority of that balance. And you can see here that, DuPont and Phil's is actually responsible for the biggest chunk of that, AR balance in the 120-day plus bucket. So in this particular use case, as a collections clerk, I'm going to focus on DuPont and Phil's and find out what's going on there. And maybe I have to put some kind of, block on their account so that we don't, you know, continue to do business with them until they get to a better position in terms of their open receivables with our organization. But from here, your collections clerk can actually drill down into the business partner or the customer master data record, which represents the 360 view of the customer, where we can actually see which invoices and everything are outstanding. But I'm going to do that through a different view, and how I want to do that, I'm going to go back to the standard view of this KPI, and what I want to show, which will include the drill down into that 360 view of the customer, is how you can actually slice and dice this particular report into a format that maybe you want to include, you know, different information. So I click on the Analyze button, the link, and this takes me into the underlining report definition that's driving the KPI. And you'll notice here that on the left, there's a selection which represents the filter, and the view which represents the columns and rows that are contained in terms of the data that's included in this report. On the left-hand side, you can see that I can control the size of my bucket. So if I wanted to see, for argument's sake, 1 to 45, 45 to 90, 90 to, you know, 125, I can specify those defaults here. And you can, of course, save the nature of your changes as you go through and slice and dice this data. But what I want to do is I want to start by changing the data to its raw format. Before I do that, you can see that there's a bunch of embedded types of visual displays in terms of how you summarize the report. It's always recommended by SAP, a best practice, that when you use these displays, that you have summary level information included, and that you don't have, you know, too many rows and columns of data. For example, we're going to add the customer record and the invoice ID to the report in a moment, which wouldn't make sense if you wanted to summarize it in some form of visual display. So what I'll do is I'll go to just show the table here. I'm going to go to my view, and I'd like to add a couple fields to this report. So what I'm going to do is add the business partner, which represents my customer. I'm going to bring in the customer invoice ID, and from here I'm also going to add my due date. So I added to the report in the row section. You can see the data is a bit messy. So what I'm going to do is bring my key figures to the column level. So now it's organized much better. I have my KPIs showing across the columns, and I have my business partner or the customer at the row level. So you can see here, I can see by customer, by invoice, and the due date where that invoice falls in terms of logical bucket. And I can actually do a couple things from here. I can add a total to the report. So this is for the entire report. I can also add a total, for example, at the customer level. Okay, I just simply go into my characteristic settings. Okay, now the report actually shows with that result row at the customer level and at a total level. From here, I can of course save this so I don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, in the future if I wanted to see this report in this format. But more importantly, I can share this report in a variety of different contexts. I can send the report as an email in the form of an attachment. So what that would do is it would automate the email out of ByDesign and add this report as an Excel template in XML format. But there's also an option to send this report via an email link. Now, what this implies is that your receiving user, the person who you're sending this to, has the appropriate access in the system from a security perspective to access this report. If you're sending it to someone that doesn't have access, they'll still be able to click the link, but they'll have an error message that says they do not have the appropriate authorization to get to this area of the system. You can, of course, download the report into a variety of different formats. What's interesting here is you can actually download the report into a CSV format, but it's linked as a data source, meaning that you can open that CSV file in the future, click refresh, and then the aging data will populate that CSV file with live information. And then, of course, you can navigate to Microsoft Excel from here. And what that does is it opens up Excel. There's a Microsoft add-in that comes pre-delivered with SAP Business ByDesign. You simply download it from a download center that's embedded in our tenant, and it allows you to slice and dice the data exactly how you've seen within the actual system today. So from here, there's a variety of things I can do. I can drill down into any one of these invoices, but what I want to do is drill down into my business partner, or known as the customer record. So you'll notice that we're actually going into the business partner record because there are different types of business partner types that a business partner can represent. And in this case, Silver Star represents both a customer, which is known as an account in SAP, as well as a supplier, which is a vendor. And the uniqueness of the setup is that if you sold to this business partner, but also purchased from them, there is this concept of netting in SAP, which allows you to net the AR with the ADP to determine whether you receive the difference or disperse the difference to their organization. So from here, I'm going to go into the accounts, which represents the 360 view of the customer. We will focus on finance, but what I wanted to mention is that there are embedded best practices, right, that tie into the other modules of our solution, like order to cash, projects, for example. You may implement something or sell something that requires project management, and you can actually see the linked projects. But what I wanted to just showcase here with this 360 view of the customer are these other tabs as well. So on the general tab, this represents the general information pertaining to this customer. And if I scroll down further here, you can see we've done business with them for quite a long time, dating back to 2012 over here. And this actually shows you your sales order volume, which is coming from the sales side of our solution. There are other reports here I can click, like if I wanted to see the open items list of receivables for this customer only, if I click this link, their customer code, which is highlighted here at the top, is passed to that report, and you'll only see the open items pertaining to this particular customer. When I click on the sales tab of the 360 view of the customer, this really speaks to the breadth of our solution. You can see the CRM capabilities here. So we have the ability, you can see that the Silver Star is being created as a lead in multiple different instances. Those leads are being converted into opportunities. From those opportunities, we've created quotes. From the quotes, we've converted them into work orders where we have a contractual agreement signed with the client, whether it's for services or product or whatever. These work orders have been executed on. There are also long-standing contracts, which you can have multiple work orders issued from. So if you have a longer-term arrangement with the client, or maybe you've negotiated a price in a master services agreement or something of that sort, you would set it up in a contract, and then each time you actually issue a work order for specific work, it would inherit the terms negotiated in that contract. And then last but not least, you can see down here, we also have target groups, which represents our marketing capabilities in our solution, where you can include the customer into a target group, which is then managed within a campaign. And you can actually use the campaign to track the success, of that marketing initiative and convert the contacts you make within a campaign into a lead. So we have this breadcrumb trail, which I'll showcase in a moment. But the way I'd like to do that is by going into financials. So again, this webinar is focused on finance, and a lot of the core capabilities will be discussed in the next few minutes here. Firstly, you'll see that we have one customer record and company code balances, if you will, that are summarized under one customer record. So we have the ability in a multi-company environment to see that our company in Canada has a balance of 209,000. The second company is also in Canada, but if you had a company in the US, for example, you could see the balance there in US dollars. We have all the invoices and credit memos associated to this client. I just have the filter on all. I can also change it to only show open, and then there's open items and so on. But from here, you've noticed that I've been able to drill down onto any blue hyperlink. So what I'll do from here is actually open up the this invoice here, invoice number 25, and I'm actually going into an invoice where we did business with this particular customer. You can see that it's for consulting type services, very similar to what we do here at Illumity. But what I wanted to show are a couple things. So if I go to the preview button, you'll actually see that we have pre-delivered form layouts what we're about to see is a layout that represents the standard out of the box version. I do apologize here. It's just taking a second to refresh. Looks like I've encountered what I call a demo demon. They sometimes do arise, and I do apologize because I think I went trigger happy there on my mouse, which may have caused the system to go in a holding pattern. So let me just refresh my browser here. You'll see that it keeps us on the invoice, which is good. So let me just go to view all. I'll try previewing it again, just to showcase the form. Come on. You know what? It looks like I'm being told that I am not able to show the invoice. So I do apologize for that, folks, but I'll regroup here and get to where I was going. So nonetheless, the preview button allows you to preview the pre-printed forms. As a part of our project, you would basically have the ability to modify those forms, but we come to the table with a standard, which is considered best practice. But what I wanted to highlight in terms of this particular invoice is this document flow. So we're looking at this invoice, and you can see that we've actually received payment already in regard to this invoice. But you can see that this invoice is a result of a project that we've engaged in with this customer, and that it's driven from the terms that have been negotiated within this sales order. If I change my anchor to the payment allocation side, you'll actually see more detail. So the customer invoice is actually being reconciled with this incoming check. The check has been cleared with this check deposit, and you can see that the deposit has been reconciled with the bank statement. The bank statement can be entered manually, but can also be automated via the BAI2 file format, where you have the ability to upload that format, and it will automatically recognize, the transactions within the bank statement and reconcile whatever 90% of what it can recognize. The 10% are things like maybe bank fees that you haven't processed in terms of a journal yet. You'll go into the bank rec and reconcile that difference, which would be identified in the BAI2 file, but not necessarily within your ERP. Now, what I'd like to do is I'm going to go back to the initial view. The other side is when I change to the sales order anchor, and I'm just going to go down here and click one more button. I'm going to change it to the lead. You'll actually see the best practice in action in what I call this breadcrumb trail. So you can see that the sales order actually came from this quote, which came from this opportunity, which came from this lead, which was generated from this marketing campaign. Okay, so that's the breadcrumb trail in SAP. But what I wanted to do is actually dive into the journal entry related to this invoice, because there are some very important concepts here that are core to this webinar. So you'll see that not only are we multi-company, but we are multi-currency and adhere to multiple sets of books which represent accounting principles. So you'll see here, this is a local currency transaction, hence why the company currency and transaction currency is in the same currency, Canadian. If you were to sell in US dollars, you would see the conversion here, where you'd have the transaction currency US dollar amount and then the conversion amount here in company currency, which happens to be Canadian. You'll note within the journal itself that the credit, instead of going to revenue, is going to deferred revenue, which implies that we have the ability to control revenue recognition principles. And that's a whole nother session where we would have to go through the intricacies of what you can do in terms of revenue recognition. But what's important to note is that we have both a Canadian GAAP journal as well as an IFRS journal. So if in that example you had different rules and treatment for revenue recognition, your related journal entry within IFRS might have a different treatment of your revenue, right? It would still go to deferred revenue, of course, but the revenue recognition rule would be different. But the point is that within these accounting principles, you have one invoice with 2 different journal entries that can follow different accounting principles. And then in addition to this, if I click on any one of these rows, you'll notice that there's a lot of information here related to other departments of our organization. So we have our project management office here, where the linked project is embedded into the journal. And I'm able to actually go into that area of the system. If I click on that blue hyperlink, I'm actually going into the project systems aspect of our solution. I mentioned that Illumity runs Business ByDesign to manage, their operations. Well, here's an example of the methodology and how we set up our projects to actually manage our spend and revenue and budgets and so on in the context of project systems. But I'm able to actually get there through the journal. So I know there's a lot in today's demo. I do apologize that the preview mechanism did not work. I literally ran that before the demo and it showed perfectly. But I've lost my trail of the sequence of clicks in terms of getting here, but I will describe it. I got to the project basically from a journal entry. I got to the journal entry from an invoice that we drilled down to the journal entry from here. And we got to this invoice, if you recall, from the 360 view of the customer. So I'll click on that. Okay. So when I go to my customer, we drill down to the invoice from the financials tab. And then we drill down into this 360 view of the customer, if everyone can recall, from that report that we sliced and diced through this dashboard. So we had actually got to that report, if you can remember in the beginning of the webinar, by clicking on this customer receivables aging KPI, which was, we discussed in the context of a collections clerk, how they would use it to manage where they are not meeting, the corporate objective in regard to that KPI. And then we obviously got to this dashboard, if I close it, from the Launchpad, which is the landing page of every user when they log into our system. So there's a lot of other things and features and functions in terms of finance. SAP is compliant to Canadian and US and many other global country requirements in terms of accounting. And it does get updated on a quarterly basis to adhere to the accounting principles, whether you're privately held or publicly traded companies. So Rihanna, that does conclude the webinar in terms of walkthrough. I'm sure we have some questions that I need to address, so I'll let you take over from here and fire them away.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for going through today's presentation. It was very insightful, and we do have a few questions to get through. So the first question that I have is, can you have multiple currencies for operations in multiple countries?
Absolutely. So the way that ByDesign works in terms of currency is when you set up your company code within a certain country localization, you actually establish the company currency for that particular company and country combination. If you needed to adhere to multiple company code currencies, we use the set of books that I alluded to, the accounting principles, to manage reporting in different types of currency. But currency is a very big topic. So if you need to report on a currency that you haven't necessarily included in your journals, there is something known as a display currency in the system where you would also specify a conversion date. So you can actually run any report in the system in any currency as long as you've maintained the exchange rate. So that's just the reporting side of it. But when it comes to the operational side in terms of debits and credits, there's company currency and transaction currency. And if you needed a different functional currency, you would use the set of books or even modify one of the existing currency codes to meet those needs. Again, depends on your requirements, but ByDesign is a multi-company global solution. I think it's deployed in like over 100 countries, if I'm not mistaken. I forget the metric now, but we've done a lot of implementations in Canada, the US, and Mexico, predominantly North America, but we do have subsidiaries where we might have a mine site, for example, in Niger, right? So that's actually something on the horizon. And we, Illumity, are part of an organization known as United VARs, which allows us to provide local resources in those countries if you needed someone to speak the language and know the local compliance requirements. I know it's a long-winded response, but I thought I'd elaborate.
No, awesome. Thank you, Andrew. The next question that I have is, how does SAP communicate with external systems, for example, Expensify?
Yeah, so SAP has a library of what are called web service APIs. Ultimately, any object in terms of master data, transactional data, comes with an associated web service API, and you would use REST or SOAP services to communicate through this mechanism. And the API is compiled in an XML type format.
Thank you. Next question is, are there customizable KPIs within SAP Business ByDesign?
Yeah, that's another great question. Yeah, so you can create a custom KPI through our SDK, which is our software development kit, which can pull on all objects or even custom objects. It depends on the need, but you do that through our SDK.
Awesome. And I think we'll take one last question for, well, unless anyone else has any more questions to come through. Does the solution come with an asset management module?
Yes, absolutely. So asset management can be interpreted in a magnitude of different ways. So if we're referring to the automation of depreciation and having fixed assets embedded into procurement, so being able to purchase them through a purchase order and then capitalize the balance sheet into a fixed assets module for automated depreciation calculation, things of that nature, reporting for taxes and stuff as well. We have a fully automated fixed asset module in the context of finance, but we also have a best of breed preventative and corrective maintenance module if we're talking about asset management in the context of maintaining the physical assets. And that module basically has the ability to, it's called preventative and corrective, meaning proactive and reactive type maintenance. So when an issue arises, you create a work order to rectify the issue, but there's also preventative maintenance for, if you think of a car, you hit a certain mileage hour counter, you then need to go in for service. And that would be an example of a preventative corrective or preventative maintenance scenario.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. And I want to give a big thanks to both Andrew and Ian for today's presentation. We're going to end a little bit earlier today.
Yep. If I could just pause you, I'm just looking at the questions. I saw a question from Michael in regard to, are the KPIs customizable? And yeah. I did want to speak to that. So we have probably, I don't know the exact number, but it's in the hundreds of KPIs that are pre-delivered. But what's very important to note is that any report that you build, and there are 467 different data sources in the system, if you customize a report, you can actually convert that report into a KPI. So what comes pre-delivered, I mean, these are things that are considered best practice, but we have clients, many of them, that create their own custom KPIs. We have some KPIs at Illumity that, for example, track the utilization of our team. And when we go below or above certain threshold, it flags us whether or not, we need to address either a resourcing issue because someone's overworked, or if there's someone that's, they don't have enough work to keep them busy. So there's many different types of KPIs you can build, and the point I want to make is that any report that you build can be converted into a KPI. So I think that's it, Brianna. I just saw that extra question when I went into the webinar details here. I hope I answered your question there, Michael.
No problem. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you everyone once again for attending today's broadcast. If you do have any additional questions after leaving today's broadcast, feel free to connect with us directly via the contact information provided in this webinar. Also, your feedback about today's broadcast is greatly appreciated. So please do fill out the follow-up survey. With that being said, I would like to once again thank you, Andrew and Ian, for today's presentation, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thank you, everybody.